The North Sea. One of the busiest, most industrious bodies of water on the planet. For centuries, its fishing fleets have fed Europe, its shipping lanes have connected nations, and in the modern age, its floor has given up immense wealth in oil and gas. But sometimes, it gives up something else, something much older and much more mysterious. Fishermen hauling in their nets, expecting to find cod and haddock, instead find the giant, curving tusk of a woolly mammoth. Dredgers, clearing the seabed for pipelines, pull up a human skull, its bones stained black by the deep water, its eye sockets staring out from a lost age. They find beautifully crafted harpoons made from antler, flint tools still sharp enough to cut. For centuries, these were just curiosities, legends told by sailors of a haunted seafloor, a place of monsters and strange bones. But these are not the bones of sea monsters. They are not the refuse from forgotten shipwrecks. They are clues, clues that point to a single, unbelievable truth, that the fishermen of the North Sea are casting their nets over a lost, prehistoric country. The drowned world. So where did these bones, these tools, this evidence of a lost world come from? To answer that question, we don't need to look deeper into the water. We need to look back, in time. Way back. To the end of the last great ice age, more than 10,000 years ago. Imagine you are looking at a map of Europe from space. But the world you see is fundamentally different. Britain is not an island. It is a rugged, mountainous peninsula, fused to the European mainland by a vast, sprawling plain. The English Channel does not exist. It is a great river valley, fed by the Thames and the Rhine. And the North Sea is not a sea at all. It is dry land. And this great low-lying plain, stretching from the eastern coast of Scotland down to the shores of Denmark and the Netherlands, was the true heartland of Stone Age Europe. It was a world of rolling hills, great rivers teeming with fish, marshlands filled with birds, and ancient forests filled with deer and wild boar. This wasn't just a land bridge for animals and early humans to cross. It was a destination, a homeland. It was a country that modern science has given a name, after the Dogger Bank, where fishermen so often find their strange catches. They call it Doggerland. The bones the fishermen are finding are not from the sea. They are from the lost forests and rivers of this drowned world. We are not looking at a few scattered artifacts from shipwrecks. We are looking at the remnants of the central territory of prehistoric Northern Europe. A lost civilization that has been hiding under the waves all this time. So if this was a country, who were its people? And what was it like to live in this Mesolithic Eden? Life in the Mesolithic Eden. So if this was a country, who were its people? And what was it like to live in this Mesolithic Eden? First, we must forget the cold, gray waves of the North Sea today. We must imagine a completely different world. Doggerland was not a barren, icy wasteland. For thousands of years, it was a lush, temperate paradise. Imagine vast forests of pine, birch, and hazel, great slow-moving rivers carving their way through the landscape, and sprawling marshlands a paradise for millions of birds, and teeming with fish like pike and eel. On the rolling hills and open plains, great herds of aurochs, wild cattle, and red deer grazed peacefully. And this land was not empty. It was home to a thriving and sophisticated population of some of the last great hunter-gatherers of Europe. These were not the brutish, stooped figures of old cartoons. They were modern humans, just like us. Intelligent, adaptable, with a deep, intricate, and sacred knowledge of their environment. The artifacts pulled from the seafloor by fishing nets are the surviving pages of their lost story. Barbed harpoons, exquisitely carved from deer antler, tell us they were expert fishermen, navigating the rich estuaries in dugout canoes. Flint arrowheads and stone axes, still sharp after 10,000 years, show us they were skilled hunters, stalking game through the ancient forests. And rare precious finds like a piece of polished amber, or bones with strange geometric symbols carved into them, hint at a rich spiritual life. A world of rituals, of myths, of stories, now lost to the silence of the deep. Imagine a small family group, camped by the side of a winding river at dusk. The smoke from their campfire drifts up through the birch trees. They are mending nets, sharpening flint tools, telling stories as the sun sets over a vast green land that they believe will last forever. For thousands of years, this was their world, stable, bountiful, a paradise hidden between the retreating ice and the distant sea. But this Eden had a fatal flaw. It was a world born from the melting of the ice, and the very same force that created their paradise would eventually be its doom. The water was coming. The shrinking paradise. The water was coming. The end of Doggerland did not happen all at once. It was not a single, violent event. It was a slow death, a drowning that took more than 2,000 years. As the last great ice sheets over North America and Scandinavia continued to melt, they released unimaginable amounts of fresh water into the oceans. Year after year, decade after decade, the global sea level rose, a few millimeters at a time, too slow to notice on any given day, but relentless, unstoppable. For the people who lived in the low-lying basin of Doggerland, their entire world began to change, generation by generation. A place where your grandfather hunted deer was now a coastal marsh for your father. And for you, it was the bottom of the sea. The familiar freshwater rivers of their homeland grew wider and saltier. The very taste of the water began to change. The coastline, once a distant concept on the horizon, was now a constant, creeping, and menacing presence. They were forced to retreat, to abandon ancient campsites that their people had used for centuries, to move further inland, to the shrinking areas of higher ground, competing for a territory that grew smaller with every full moon. By around 6,500 BC, the vast plain that connected Britain to the continent was gone. What remained of Doggerland was now a large, low-lying island, a final refuge in the heart of the newly formed North Sea, with Britain now a separate island to the west. It was a precarious existence, an entire people living on borrowed time, surrounded by the rising water that was slowly strangling their world. They were survivors, clinging to the last remnant of their drowned paradise. They must have thought the worst was over. They must have believed that the slow rise of the sea was the only enemy they had to fight. They were wrong, because hundreds of miles to the north, off the coast of Norway, a far greater and far more sudden catastrophe was brewing deep beneath the waves. An event that would not just shrink their world, but obliterate it in a single, terrifying day. The wave that killed a country. The end of Doggerland did not come from the slow, rising tide. It came from the deep. Off the coast of Norway, on the steep edge of the continental shelf, a vast section of the seabed, An area larger than the country of Scotland had been unstable for centuries, overloaded with sediment from the melting glaciers. Around 8,200 years ago, something, perhaps a deep-sea earthquake, finally gave it the last fatal push. It is now known as the Storegga Slide, a landslide of almost unimaginable scale, happening in the crushing darkness, miles beneath the surface of the ocean. It displaced over 3,000 cubic kilometers of sediment, the equivalent of every single person on Earth today, moving a pile of dirt the size of a great pyramid. All at the same instant. An event this violent does not happen in silence. It created a wave, a mega-tsunami. It was not a wave you could surf. It was a moving mountain range of water, racing across the North Sea at the speed of a modern jet airliner. For the people of Doggerland, living on their low-lying island refuge, there would have been no warning. Perhaps a strange, unnatural receding of the tide, exposing the seabed for miles in an eerie silence. And then, a dark line on the horizon, growing impossibly fast. A wall of black water, perhaps as high as 10 meters, a 30-foot-tall wall of destruction, moving with unstoppable fury. It would have swept over the entire island in a matter of minutes, erasing everything. The last villages, the last forests, the last people. An entire culture. The work of thousands of years of human history, gone in a single, brutal afternoon. When the water finally receded, there was nothing left. The last great island of Doggerland was gone, submerged forever beneath the waves. The Mesolithic Eden had become a watery grave. But humanity is resilient. Some must have survived. People who were living on the highest remaining hills, or those who had already migrated to the new coastlines of Britain and Denmark. And this raises a new question. What happened to the refugees of this drowned world? And what is their hidden legacy? The survivor's story. The wave receded. The sea grew calm again. But the map of Europe was changed forever. But on the newly formed coastlines of what was now the island of Britain, and in the marshes of the Netherlands and Denmark, there must have been survivors. People who saw the great wave coming from the north and fled to the highest ground they could find. People who were already living on the fertile highlands that bordered the Great Plain. They were refugees from a drowned continent. For a long time, this was just speculation, a ghost story. But modern genetics is now giving these ghosts a voice. Recent, large-scale DNA studies of ancient Mesolithic remains found in Britain and across mainland Europe are painting a new, complex picture of our deep ancestry. The evidence suggests that a significant portion of the hunter-gatherer population that would form the very foundation of the first British people did not come across Doggerland. They came from Doggerland. This changes everything. It means the origin story of Britain might not be one of colonizers arriving on an empty island. It might be a story of refugees. The first Britons may have been the traumatized survivors of a prehistoric Atlantis, their collective memory of a great world-ending flood possibly passing down into the earliest myths and legends of the British Isles. The evidence is not just in our DNA, it's in the shared styles of tools, the similar burial practices, and the common artistic symbols found on both sides of what is now the North Sea. These are the faint cultural echoes of a world that once connected them all, a lost heartland whose influence spread outwards with its survivors. So the people of Doggerland were not entirely wiped out. They survived. They assimilated. Their blood may still run in the veins of millions of modern Europeans today. They are the hidden chapter in the story of Britain. And now, with this tantalizing evidence of their survival, the quest to find their lost homeland, to map their drowned world in detail, has become more urgent than ever before. Mapping a ghost. How do you explore a country that lies 200 feet beneath one of the busiest and most dangerous seas in the world? You use a different kind of explorer. Not men in sailing ships, but geologists, archaeologists, and computer scientists. And their most powerful tool comes from a very unlikely source. For decades, oil and gas companies have been blasting the floor of the North Sea with seismic surveys, creating a massive, three-dimensional map of the rock layers deep beneath the seabed in their hunt for fossil fuels. They weren't looking for a lost world, but they found one by accident. When archaeologists finally got their hands on this multi-billion-dollar data set, a ghost began to emerge from the machine. On their computer screens, through the noise of the raw data, they could see it, the faint but unmistakable outlines of a lost landscape. The great river valleys, where the Rhine and the Thames once met, the rolling hills and the gentle slopes, the shorelines of a vast, ancient freshwater lake. And now, new expeditions are going out with a singular purpose: to map Doggerland in breathtaking detail. Ships, armed with high-resolution sonar, are patiently mowing the lawn of the seabed, painting a picture of this lost world with sound waves. Coring devices are pulling up long tubes of sediment from the ancient riverbeds, giving us physical samples of the pollen from the trees that grew there, the microscopic fossils from the plants, and even the environmental DNA of the animals that roamed its forests. The result of all this work is a virtual resurrection. For the first time in over 8,000 years, we can see the world of Doggerland again. On a computer, we can walk its riverbanks. We can see the hills where our ancestors made their camps. We can pinpoint the exact locations where a mammoth died or where a fisherman dropped his harpoon. It is one of the most ambitious archaeological projects on the planet. A painstaking, high-tech effort to map a ghost. And with every new piece of data, the ghost becomes more solid. The lost world feels a little less lost. But this new, detailed picture of a real, tangible world only makes its final, violent disappearance more poignant. And it forces us to ask the final question: what does it truly mean to lose a country? Britain's Atlantis. What does it truly mean to lose a country? For thousands of years, humanity has been haunted by a single, powerful story. The story of Atlantis. A great, advanced civilization, swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. We have always treated it as a myth, a fantasy invented by Plato. But what if the story is a memory, a distant, fractured echo of a real event, passed down through countless generations? Doggerland is not a myth. It is Britain's Atlantis. A real, tangible world lost to the waves. And its story is not just a tragedy from the deep past. It is a profound and urgent cautionary tale for our own time. The people of Doggerland did not have industrial pollution or carbon emissions. They faced a natural cycle of climate change, a warming world that melted the great ice sheets and relentlessly raised the seas. They watched helplessly as their world first shrank and then drowned. They were, perhaps, the first true climate refugees of the modern human era. And their fate is a stark reminder that our coastlines are not permanent, that our cities are not invincible, and that our world, too, can change in ways that are difficult to imagine. Today, the North Sea is one of the busiest places on Earth. Ferries carry tourists. Trawlers hunt for fish. Great rigs drill for oil. And 200 feet below them lies a silent, perfectly preserved prehistoric world, the heartland of our European ancestors. A world of hunters and mammoths is now a vast, watery ghost lying just off the coast. It is a landscape of memory, a testament to the awesome power of the planet and the incredible resilience of humanity. And it is a quiet reminder that the past is never truly dead. It is simply waiting in the darkness and the silence of the deep to be rediscovered.
More stories they tried to erase.